The story kicks off with a massive red dragon, a nightmare incarnate, looming over its prey. A young girl with raven black hair stands frozen, paralyzed by the sight of this legendary beast. Beside her, a man she calls Uncle stands ready, decked out in full battle gear. The atmosphere turns suffocating as the dragon launches a sudden, lethal assault, turning their surroundings into a death trap. Tension spikes as the uncle reveals his true self, a cold, calculated combatant. With blinding speed and pinpoint precision, he counters the dragon's attack, leaving the beast reeling. Beneath his tattered red cloak, an overwhelming aura of power radiates from him, proving his confidence wasn't just bluster, it was a promise of destruction amidst the dragon's blood-soaked reign. The gargantuan dragon crashes to the earth, shattered after taking a finishing blow from the uncle, who now stands tall and triumphant. The girl watches, mesmerized, her eyes sparkling with pure awe. She's stunned that her uncle could dismantle such a formidable monster so effortlessly, as if this life-or-death struggle were nothing more than a minor chore. But that heroic image shatters instantly when we see his pathetic reality. The legendary Dragon Slayer is now just a jobless, unkempt loser playing mobile games in the park, getting bullied by elementary school kids. Instead of shame, he's petty and arrogant, bragging that he'll use his pay-to-win power just to crush these little brats. In the heat of his ridiculous argument with the kids, a beautiful high school girl appears behind him, her gaze icy. The man breaks into a cold sweat, acting incredibly awkward. It's Satsuki. The intimidating aura of the Dragon Slayer has vanished, leaving only a pathetic uncle nervous about being caught as a pay-to-win gamer by a young girl. Satsuki stares at him, asking if he even remembers her after all this time. While the moment is heavy with emotion for her, the uncle can only offer a short, awkward response, clearly embarrassed by his current state. He quickly invites Satsuki to his apartment, trying to play it cool while desperately hoping she won't notice the disaster hidden behind his door. The moment the door opens, the sight is horrifying. His room is a total wreck, looking more like a landfill than a living space. Satsuki erupts in rage, shocked that the man she admired lives in conditions worse than an animal's den. Meanwhile, the uncle obliviously rummages through mountains of trash looking for tea, perfectly capturing the downfall of a once great hero. Seeing the state of the apartment, Satsuki loses it and tears into him with a brutal lecture. She's disgusted by the fact that he only showers once every 2 days, a filthy habit that defies all logic. Fighting back the nausea from the stench, she kicks him into the shower to clean himself up while she takes it upon herself to purge the garbage pile. After a grueling cleanup, the floor finally sees the light of day. But Satsuki's focus is broken when the uncle steps out of the bathroom shirtless, drying his hair. She's left stunned and flustered. Despite his hobo aesthetic, the man is hiding an incredibly athletic, rock-hard physique beneath that disheveled exterior. Blushing furiously, Satsuki shoves a pile of clean clothes at him, demanding he cover up. The uncle, completely oblivious to her discomfort, just obeys and thanks her for the help. Once things settle down and he's dressed, he asks seriously why she went through all the trouble of hunting him down in this dump. Satsuki starts with a somber tone, reminding him of his glory days as a top-tier dungeon crawler. During the nostalgic talk, the uncle casually cracks open a drink, triggering Satsuki, who assumes he's hitting the booze in broad daylight. Luckily, the tension evaporates when he shows it's just a can of cola, not the hard stuff she feared. Sipping his soda, the uncle declares he's willing to do whatever she asks. Seeing her opening, Satsuki doesn't hesitate, locking eyes with him with sharp, ambitious intensity. She demands that he teach her every technique and secret to conquering dungeons so she can become a formidable fighter. At this insane request, the uncle chokes, nearly dropping his soda and shaking the table. Here, his true identity is unveiled. This lazy bum is Katakura Renji, the once greatest dungeon conqueror in all of Japan. Even with his life in shambles, the chiseled muscle on his frame is a silent testament that his legendary power might still be lurking beneath the filth. Satsuki doubles down, begging Renji to train her for the perils of the dungeon. Renji goes silent, drains the rest of his drink, and sets the glass down as the atmosphere turns ice cold. Without a word, his hair shadowing his eyes, he delivers a blunt refusal. Her request is impossible. Renji's firm rejection is instantly countered by a mental trap. Satsuki plays a recording of him promising to do anything for her. Caught in his own web, Renji breaks into a cold sweat at his niece's cunning. She screams with raw emotion, insisting she's dead serious about entering the dungeon. The comedy vanishes, replaced by a heavy, poignant moment when Satsuki mentions her parents, who vanished inside a dungeon, finally breaking through Renji's defenses. The surprises didn't end there. Satsuki had done her homework, uncovering a massive secret. Renji had stashed a fortune deep inside a dungeon during his glory days. Renji was left speechless, wondering how a high schooler could dig up such classified info. Satsuki casually admitted she'd just done a little background check on her uncle. She also pointed out that he'd only ever teamed up with her parents, a fact that left Renji cornered and hiding his face, completely outclassed by his niece's intelligence. Still reeling from the revelation, Renji pressed her for the real reason she was so obsessed with conquering dungeons. Satsuki didn't blink. She bluntly stated she was flat out broke. The honesty was so brutal it left Renji's jaw on the floor, especially when she shot him a look of pure disdain, as if he were nothing more than a pathetic, washed-up bum. As she sipped her drink, Satsuki poured her heart out. Her current income wasn't enough to cover school or support her grandmother. Raiding dungeons was her only ticket to a better life. When a skeptical Renji asked if dungeons were even safe now, Satsuki lit up. She explained that modern dungeons are nothing like the death traps from his era. They're safe, controlled, and almost entirely devoid of casualties. Satsuki pulled up her tablet, showing off the latest trend. Dungeons have become the ultimate entertainment hub through live streaming. She explained that adventurers now make a killing from viewer donations, a concept that made Renji feel like a total relic. With absolute confidence, she claimed that with the guidance of Japan's former strongest conqueror, she could monetize her content and strike it rich in no time. Watching her uncle slump in silence, Satsuki couldn't help but feel bad for a legend wasting his life in a messy room. She probed deeper, asking why he seemingly hated dungeons so much when her grandmother said he used to love them. The question hit home, leaving Renji stunned and unable to respond, as if an old, jagged wound had just been ripped open. Renji mumbled that her parents wouldn't want her anywhere near a dungeon. He offered to go in her place, but Satsuki wouldn't budge. The financial pressure was just too high. When he sarcastically suggested she become a gaming streamer instead, she stood her ground, hiding a deeper, secret reason for her persistence. Finally, Satsuki played her trump card. She had the blood of an adventurer running through her veins. Renji could only scratch his head, realizing the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Despite his firm refusal, Satsuki remained stubborn, insisting she loved her life and was determined to protect it, no matter what it took. The scene shifts to the entrance of the Ikebukuro dungeon, where the duo is geared up. They look like an odd couple. Renji is clad in heavy, ancient armor that looks like it belongs in a museum. Bystanders whispered and laughed, labeling him a confused old man playing dress-up. Renji offered to call it off, sensing Satsuki's nerves, but she shut him down immediately. Clutching her sword, Satsuki insisted that since she dragged him here, she'd take responsibility. Renji tried to ease the tension, insisting he was just there to do his job and keep her safe. Behind his stoic gaze, Renji knew he was playing on a completely different level than these amateurs. Before heading in, Satsuki took a moment to calibrate her high-tech recording gear. Renji was blown away by the tech. She had an autonomous drone camera tracking their every move. She also flexed her modern kit, a sword with auto-defense functions and a 360-degree barrier shield powered by the dungeon's own ambient mana. Satsuki pulled up a highly detailed digital map of the first floor on her handheld device. She explained that dungeons were basically amusement parks now, complete with free pamphlets and clearly marked safe zones. Looking at his niece, who was barely wearing any armor thanks to her gear, Renji realized his heavy, clanking battle armor was total overkill for a casual stroll on the first floor. As they crossed the threshold, Renji innocently asked if they were going straight for the boss. Satsuki laughed in his face. Taking down a boss was for elite pros, not beginners looking for a death wish. She reminded him the goal was just a site survey, though, deep down, Renji was already calculating the massive payday they'd get if they actually took the boss down. Unbeknownst to them, a group of shady figures in sunglasses were watching their live stream, plotting to target the cute girl and the old man. Inside, Satsuki decided to stick to low-level mobs for some easy pocket change. She was buzzing with excitement for her first real fight, while Renji followed along, resigned but hypervigilant, keeping a close eye on his inexperienced niece. Once they pushed deeper, the chilling atmosphere of the dungeon started to get to Satsuki. Noticing her trembling, Renji praised her sharp instincts and told her to keep her head on a swivel. Even though she put on a brave face, claiming she'd be the one protecting him, it was clearly a front to mask the massive nerves of her first-ever life-or-death debut in the dungeon. Their momentum was broken by a group of loudmouths in sunglasses who blocked their path. The guys sneered at Renji, calling him reckless and irresponsible for dragging a girl into such a dangerous place. They acted like big shots, telling Renji to head home because his services weren't needed, all while bragging that they would be the ones to play the hero for Satsuki. The heated bickering vanished in an instant as a projectile whistled through the air, nearly blowing one of them to pieces. Renji, his expression turning deathly serious, instantly analyzed the situation. Anyone capable of such pinpoint accuracy at the head was a high-level monster of extreme danger. While those arrogant fools stood frozen in shock, their lives hanging by a thread, Renji coldly barked at them to look behind them immediately. From the suffocating darkness of the cave, a crushing aura emerged, hitting the men so hard they were mentally broken and paralyzed in fear. Realizing the situation had spiraled out of control, Renji roared for everyone to retreat if they wanted to keep their heads. But before they could even move, a massive, muscular hand slammed into the ground, a clear sign that their opponent possessed strength that defied all common sense. A hulking, vicious-looking orc stepped into the light, gripping a massive club ready to turn anyone into pulp. The guys who were acting like big shots were now pale as ghosts, realizing they couldn't win this fight with mere posturing. Satsuki panicked, noticing the orc had no bow, leading Renji to warn them that something else was likely stalking them from the shadows. Their bad feeling was confirmed when a horde of orcs emerged from the rear, cutting off every possible escape route. The situation went from bad to worse as the ground began to tremble violently, as if something truly massive was closing in. Satsuki, who had been itching to show off her strength, was now stunned into silence, terrified by the sheer, impossible number of monsters surrounding them. The climax arrived with the emergence of the pack leader, a gargantuan orc decked out in full armor, wielding a weapon that emanated the aura of a grim reaper. Seeing this intimidating dungeon boss, the courage of the arrogant group evaporated, and they looked ready to faint on the spot. Satsuki could only cover her mouth, paralyzed by the sheer terror of seeing the dungeon's true ruler standing right before them. The presence of an orc king broke every rule in the book. A boss-level threat like this should never spawn on the first floor, which usually only held cannon fodder. The group spiraled into a panicked frenzy, realizing this wasn't just a bad day, this was an abnormal dungeon anomaly. Satsuki, who once thought this place was safe, stood limp and pale, finally grasping the brutal reality that no dungeon is ever truly free from the shadow of death. Desperate, Satsuki tried to play the hero, telling the older man to run while she acted as a distraction, fully aware she was walking into a death trap. But the cowardly youths behind them offered a sickening suggestion: sacrifice the old man so they could escape. Hearing such trashy talk, the man just sighed, feeling that it was far too early for Satsuki to be throwing her life away against such a monster. Suddenly, the man, who had seemed like nothing more than an average Joe, exuded an entirely different aura, standing tall and imposing before the group. With a razor-sharp gaze and unshakable confidence, he stepped forward to challenge the Orc King himself. This mental shift revealed that he was no ordinary person, and he was ready to teach anyone who disturbed his peace a very painful lesson. The man's sudden transformation left Satsuki stunned, her eyes shimmering with disbelief at what she was witnessing. Across the battlefield, the Orc horde began to feel the pressure, and the Orc King itself grew grim, realizing that the human standing before him possessed a power level that was off the charts. The tension in the air skyrocketed as the dungeon master finally stopped looking down on his prey. Without a single word, the giant orc king stomped the ground and drew his heavy, lethal weapon. With eyes burning with rage, the boss swung his club blindly at the man with speed that defied his massive bulk. The strike carried such immense destructive power that it whipped up a violent gale, shaking the very foundations of the battlefield. Despite the brute force of the assault, the man dodged with effortless grace, launching a counterattack faster than the human eye could track. He surged through the Orc King's defenses, landing a flurry of precise strikes amidst the surrounding horde. His agile, efficient movements proved he was a high-tier veteran well-versed in the brutal dance of life and death. In one final, devastating motion, the man unleashed a single, lethal slash directly at the Orc King's massive frame. The strike erupted in a brilliant flash of light, slicing through the air with such impossible force that the monster was left completely helpless. This finishing blow was proof. The man they had dismissed as insignificant was actually a monster far more terrifying than anything else in that dungeon. Giving the monsters no room to breathe, the man continued his slaughter with movements that defied logic. He darted through the crowd of orcs at lightning speed, cleaving through every enemy in his path until their bodies fell in clean, severed pieces. This wasn't just self-defense, it was a one-sided massacre that reduced the once fearsome monsters to piles of corpses in mere seconds. Seeing their comrades slaughtered in an instant, the remaining orcs stood frozen, their faces twisted in terror as if they'd seen the Grim Reaper himself. Even the arrogant Orc King stood slack-jawed, his glowing eyes wide with shock, unable to believe his elite army had been dismantled so easily. The battlefield, once filled with bloodthirsty roars, fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the man standing calmly amidst the wreckage. The aftermath of that final blow was beyond reason, leaving the landscape shattered and the monsters reduced to shredded remains all around him. Satsuki, watching from just a few feet away, remained frozen with a hollow gaze, struggling to process if what she had just witnessed was reality or a fever dream. Meanwhile, the others were in such a state of shock that they screamed hysterically, unable to comprehend a level of power that completely shattered human logic. Once the coast was clear, the uncle nonchalantly sheathed his sword, letting out a long sigh as if he'd just finished a tedious chore. He turned to Satsuki, checking on her with genuine concern, asking if she'd been hurt during the skirmish. Still dazed, Satsuki could only stare at him, her face flushing as she realized the truth. The man standing before her was likely the strongest individual in Japan, someone who had been hiding his true identity all along. Instead of basking in his own greatness, the uncle started lecturing Satsuki, telling her she needed to train harder so she could handle monsters like that with ease in the future. This only added to Satsuki's frustration. The uncle's definition of easy was completely detached from the reality of a normal adventurer. Meanwhile, the live stream's comments section was spiraling into chaos, with thousands of viewers debating and refusing to believe the sheer power displayed by this mysterious, internet-breaking uncle. A quick flashback revealed that his greatness wasn't new. Even in his youth, he was constantly praised for his rapidly evolving speed. Despite the accolades from his peers, he remained incredibly humble, always insisting that the mission's success was due to teamwork rather than his own prowess. It was this lack of ego that kept him looking like an ordinary middle-aged man, masking a past filled with horrifying combat experience. But the calm didn't last. Suddenly, a thick, suffocating aura of darkness rippled from the distance. This presence felt entirely different, far more potent than any monster they had faced before, instantly ratcheting up the tension. Sensing the looming threat, the uncle immediately shifted into a defensive stance, knowing full well that this wasn't some grunt that could be dispatched with a single strike. Facing such overwhelming pressure, the uncle calmly admitted that this new threat was beyond the reach of an average human. Though the atmosphere felt heavy with dread, they both decided to retreat from the area. Beneath his composed exterior, the uncle seemed to be contemplating something much deeper, the fragility of human limits when pitted against forces that defy reason. Bitter memories surfaced. Satsuki was forced to confront the haunting reality that she was standing in the very spot where her parents had perished years ago. It seemed that powerful enemies always struck when she was most vulnerable, tearing at the mental trauma she had worked so hard to suppress. Satsuki slumped in defeat, visibly crushed as the weight of that tragic loss returned to haunt her, bathing the scene in raw, palpable sorrow. Seeing her in such a state, the uncle could only hope that today's events would serve as a lesson for her to keep a cooler head in the future. Without further ado, he told her to head home and get some rest to recover. Surprisingly, the somber mood broke when Satsuki, with pure innocence, reminded the uncle not to forget to take a shower once he got home, a small, domestic gesture he met with a short, resigned nod. The story shifts into a new chapter, highlighting the evolving, colorful dynamics between the uncle and those around him. With a title focusing on Satsuki's growing frustration, the visuals contrast the high-strung energy of the girls with the uncle's laid-back, serious demeanor. This arc promises a blend of action and comedy, centered on the uncle's hidden OP power that is quickly becoming the talk of the town. The next day, Satsuki confronted the uncle with a face full of fire. Without a hint of hesitation, she shouted in his face about how incredibly frustrated she was with the current situation. The uncle, who had just woken up or was busy lounging around, responded with a blank, unenthusiastic expression, clearly used to Satsuki's daily outbursts. Waving her phone around, Satsuki excitedly demanded he watch a viral video making waves online. It featured the live stream footage of the thugs who had tried to mess with them the day before. The uncle, completely oblivious, remarked that those guys deserved their fame for being so hilarious, but Satsuki shot him down with an even sharper tone. It turned out the video wasn't trending because of the pathetic thugs, but because of the uncle's cool, accidental cameo in the background. Satsuki was fuming at the lost opportunity to profit from the viral moment. Watching his niece obsess over her phone, the uncle was secretly impressed by her mental fortitude. Even with their ridiculous antics going viral, Satsuki didn't show signs of being depressed or broken, she just brushed it off. The uncle recognized that this steel trap mentality was her most valuable asset. Soon after, Satsuki put the phone down, her expression suddenly turning somber and serious. Without warning, Satsuki performed a full dajiza, a prostration of apology, right in front of the uncle, who panicked instantly. With sincere regret, she apologized for her arrogance and for downplaying his warnings when she first asked him to accompany her to the dungeon. She finally realized that her past decisions were reckless and understood why he had been so desperate to stay away from that cursed, monster-infested hellhole. Seeing his niece prostrate herself in remorse, the uncle's heart softened. He gently patted her head to calm her down. He insisted that as an adult, the responsibility was his for agreeing to go along with her request, so she shouldn't carry the burden alone. To him, yesterday was a calculated risk, and what mattered most was that Satsuki learned a valuable lesson to avoid such recklessness in the future. Once things cooled down, the uncle tested his niece's resolve, asking if yesterday's trauma had finally made her give up on dungeon diving. To his surprise, Satsuki vehemently shook her head, denying it with a surge of renewed spirit. Far from being cured of her ambition, she seemed more determined than ever, though she quickly tried to change the subject by offering to get him a cold drink to break the awkward tension. Sitting there, still looking a bit pale, Satsuki admitted that yesterday's Orc King encounter was beyond logic, it scared the life out of her. Yet, she felt something strange, despite her life being on the line, a part of her was actually thrilled by the challenge. Hearing such a reckless confession, her uncle, currently standing by the fridge, just stared blankly, wondering if his niece had finally lost her marbles and developed an addiction to danger. Tossing her a canned drink, her uncle muttered that Satsuki's stubborn, thrill-seeking nature proves she's definitely the daughter of her equally reckless parents. Satsuki suspected that her unnatural excitement stemmed from not knowing the true limits of her own strength. She stared intensely at the can, deep in thought about the dormant potential locked within her. Her memory drifted back to that harrowing moment, staring directly into the Orc King's maw, ready to be devoured. The image of her life hanging by a thread and how insignificant she felt against that monster haunted her mind. Even though her eyes betrayed the deep trauma of tasting real death, that fear acted as fuel, igniting an even greater ambition within her. As he poured a drink into his glass, her uncle hit Satsuki with a harsh reality check. He felt her expectations for the dungeon were way too high, leaving her trapped between feeling invincible and utterly powerless. With the laid-back tone of a middle-aged guy who loves to hang out, he insisted she needed to understand her own limits and start facing the cold, hard truth. Here, we get an interesting technical look at their world's logic. Apparently, dungeons are saturated with magic energy that makes everything easier, from casting spells to swinging heavy swords. But her uncle warned that this doesn't mean Satsuki can do everything instantly. In fact, many meet tragic ends because they never learned to control their own bodies once they stepped outside the dungeon's energy-assisted zone. To prove his point, her uncle told Satsuki to stand up and close her eyes tight. Though confused by the sudden instruction, she complied. He told her to hold both arms straight out, like a simple balance test to see how well she could coordinate her body without the aid of her vision. Once she opened her eyes, she was shocked to see her arms were crooked, not straight at all. Her uncle explained that imagination and reality are two different things, especially in a dungeon where depth perception is warped. Feeling her pride wounded by failing such a simple test, she pouted and challenged her uncle to do the same, especially since he was currently under the influence of alcohol. The uncle accepted the challenge calmly, closed his eyes, and positioned his arms. To her shock, he stretched them out with perfect, professional precision. Seeing that unexpected sight, Satsuki could only gape in disbelief. She never realized her lazy-looking uncle possessed such insane body control. Satsuki finally realized the man before her wasn't just some ordinary uncle, but perhaps the strongest dungeon raider to ever exist. Even as he laughed, bragging that a couple of drinks couldn't throw off his balance, she could clearly sense his overwhelming aura. Without wasting a second, she bowed and pleaded with him to teach her the ropes of conquering dungeons from the ground up. Satsuki's eyes were now sparkling with fiery determination, a look so pure it actually made her uncle wince. He teased her, asking if her talk about making money was just a cover, but Satsuki admitted that money was still a priority. The difference now was that she didn't want a free ride, she wanted to learn so she could stand on her own 2 feet when facing future dangers. Satsuki poured her heart out, revealing that her curiosity wasn't just about cash, but the mystery of her parents. She wanted to know what made them so obsessed with the dungeon that they lost their lives there. With a weary but hopeful gaze, she begged her uncle to tell her everything, because to her, understanding the dungeon was the only way to feel close to her parents' memory again. Her uncle sighed, exhaling a cloud of smoke as he processed his niece's serious ambition. Satsuki insisted that if she wanted to play around, she would have just invited her amateur classmates. But because she wanted to be the best, she only wanted to learn from him, the strongest raider of them all. Satsuki knew she lacked special abilities, which was why she was banking everything on his guidance. Seeing that iron will, her uncle finally caved and made a bold promise. He trained Satsuki until monsters like the Orc King felt like pebbles she could easily kick aside. He told her to meet him after school to kick off their brutal training. Satsuki was floored. She knew the Orc King was a high-level threat that would make pro raiders wet their pants, yet to her uncle, it was just minor training material. The next day at school, Satsuki looked sour, glaring at her friends. Her uncle was there, happily mingling and gaming with the kids, even getting accused of cheating because his skills were god tier. Satsuki, ready for combat in her full gear, was annoyed to see him joking around instead of projecting the serious aura of a master raider. It was a sight that made her want to blow a fuse. After the uncle finished trolling Satsuki's friends until they rage quit, the two finally headed out. Satsuki suggested they hit a family restaurant to chat, but her uncle, with an innocent face, admitted he was flat broke. The fancy dinner plans were scrapped, and they ended up at a nearby convenience store for cheap juice boxes, a truly humble fate for the world's strongest raider. Out of nowhere, a bubbly, blonde-haired girl named Miyu Asahina bursts onto the scene with high-octane energy. Flashing a peace sign and a playful wink, she introduces herself to the uncle with total confidence. Her arrival instantly turns the duo's quiet dynamic into a chaotic, noisy mess. Miyu, being the natural flirt she is, immediately clings to the uncle's arm, teasingly remarking that he's found himself a fresh, young recruit. The uncle, caught off guard by the sudden physical contact, stiffens up, visibly awkward. Meanwhile, behind them, Satsuki is radiating a dark, ominous aura, her face deadpan but seething with fury. She coldly warns Miyu to back off before she turns this situation into a national disaster. Seeing Satsuki's fuse about to blow, Miyu laughs it off, promising she won't steal her friend's uncle. But Miyu can't help herself. She leans in way too close, staring deep into his eyes while complimenting how surprisingly handsome he looks up close. The uncle is left completely flustered, feeling like the personal space boundary has been crossed, and then some. Jealousy hitting peak levels, Satsuki goes on the offensive, determined to tank the uncle's reputation. With a scowl, she spills all his dirty laundry. He's a slob who rarely showers, his room looks like a landfill, and he's been wearing the same clothes since yesterday. The uncle tries to interject, but his protests are drowned out as Satsuki demands to know exactly why Miyu is really following them. Miyu finally reveals her main motive. She's obsessed with the uncle's viral dungeon-clearing footage currently blowing up the internet. She admits she was stunned to discover that the mysterious, OP powerhouse in the video is actually Satsuki's uncle. Glowing with excitement, she shoves her phone in his face to show just how massive the impact of that recording has become. The video has already racked up hundreds of thousands of views, with thousands of comments flooding the discussion board. Netizens are split. Some are praising the cute girl next to him, while others are convinced the whole thing is just CGI or AI-generated fake news. Some are even leaving hate comments, slamming the uncle for endangering a young girl by dragging her into a dungeon. Seeing the toxic comments, Satsuki sighs, muttering that going viral always brings out the haters. The uncle looks visibly annoyed by the baseless accusations flying across the screen. Just as the tension starts to thicken, Miyu flashes a sly, scheming grin, clearly planning to monetize this viral fame for her own gain. Once they arrive at what looks like their living quarters, things get weird. Miyu starts frantically digging through her bag, muttering about current trends as she pulls out a mountain of electronic gadgets. Satsuki and the uncle just stand there, frozen and bewildered, watching this unexpected display of tech savviness. Miyu plops down on the floor, showing off her massive collection of smartphones like a pro gadget dealer. She confidently declares that if they launch a content channel right here, the views will come pouring in. She looks incredibly satisfied with her setup, while Satsuki and the uncle just exchange blank stares, totally lost as to what this blonde menace is cooking up. Miyu goes full throttle, operating her devices at lightning speed to drop a major announcement. She confidently suggests they name the channel Aji-san Channel to make it iconic. Lounging on the bed like a total boss, she orders the others to register accounts on every social media platform to ensure their marketing strategy is flawless. Miyu's fingers dance across the screens at a speed that leaves Satsuki and the uncle completely dumbfounded. The uncle even admits that the younger generation's tech skills are terrifying, way beyond his imagination. Satsuki, meanwhile, is wallowing in despair, feeling completely useless and like a total tech dinosaur compared to Miyu's digital agility. In the blink of an eye, Miyu announces everything is registered with ultra-secure, randomized passwords. Satsuki, who has lived a sheltered life, is overwhelmed, realizing there are entire worlds of social media she never knew existed. The real shock hits when Miyu reveals their DunTube channel. It has already gained 106 subscribers out of thin air. The situation turns surreal as the subscriber count skyrockets from 106 to 200 in seconds. Satsuki starts to panic, feeling like this defies all logic, especially since they haven't even uploaded a single video yet. Seeing Satsuki's confusion, Miyu just gives a devious, knowing smirk, revealing she's been pulling strings behind the scenes. The mystery of the subscriber explosion is solved when Miyu shows off her personal account, which boasts over 70,000 followers. She nonchalantly explains that all she had to do was post an official confirmation that this was the real uncle's channel to incite the masses. It was a masterstroke, with so many fake accounts floating around, a stamp of approval from an influencer like Miyu sent her massive fanbase flooding to their page. Miyu optimistically predicts they'll be trending in no time if this growth continues. But the mood suddenly turns serious as the uncle worries about Satsuki's mental state, asking if she's truly prepared to be thrust into the spotlight before thousands of people. The question leaves Satsuki tense and speechless, while in the background, the subscriber count continues to climb, hitting 781 and counting. The climax hit when their subscriber count finally exploded, crossing the 1,000 mark with a flurry of virtual confetti filling the screen. Satsuki was shell-shocked, spiraling at the realization that her audience now outnumbered her entire high school. As notification chimes rained down like relentless bombshells, Miyu sprang into action, silencing the alerts to keep the room from descending into complete chaos. Satsuki's mental state shattered further as she scanned the comment section, which was flooded with skeptics. Some accused the video of being AI-generated, claiming the cast looked too perfect to be real, while others demanded an immediate live stream. As Satsuki sat there, mouth agape in pure shock, Miyu remained cool as a cucumber, teasing her friend mercilessly. She sarcastically remarked that Satsuki usually had nerves of steel, even though the poor girl looked like she was about to faint from the pressure. Miyu and her uncle's taunts, calling her bold yet shameless, hit a nerve. Refusing to be labeled a coward, Satsuki snapped out of her panic and into beast mode to defend her pride. With a decisive swipe, she killed the screen, signaling the end of her hesitation. Face set with grim determination, she shook off her anxiety and told them it was time to head to the dungeon, right now. Seeing Satsuki's fire, Miyu pulled a fast one, flashing her phone to show that their premiere announcement had just gone live. The speed of Miyu's execution left her uncle speechless, while Satsuki felt the weight of her friend's terrifying efficiency. Miyu confidently handed the burden of their success over to the uncle, demanding he pull off some epic moves on camera. Satsuki could only sigh, realizing their fate was now dangling by a thread. Just as the mood turned serious, Miyu pulled a stunt that defied all logic, turning the room awkward in a heartbeat. Without a shred of hesitation or shame, she started unbuttoning her shirt to change for the mission. The sudden move left Satsuki completely frozen, staring at her friend like she'd just seen a ghost in broad daylight. Instead of stopping, Miyu doubled down, dragging Satsuki into the mix. She insisted that as a dungeon-delving team, they needed to be synchronized, right down to their gear. Satsuki, feeling her dignity under siege, shrieked while trying to break free from Miyu's aggressive grip. Despite the frantic struggle, Miyu wouldn't budge, forcing her friend to ditch the school uniform for some proper battle-ready attire. Miyu kept teasing her, arguing that there was nothing to be embarrassed about between girls. But Satsuki's real concern was the uncle still lingering in the room. She peeked around, heart pounding, only to realize the room had gone dead silent. The uncle had vanished without a trace, as if he'd intentionally stepped out to give them their privacy. Satsuki felt a wave of relief and respect. The uncle had exited with such grace before things got out of hand. To her, this silent departure was proof he was a true gentleman who respected boundaries. Miyu, however, felt a bit slighted. She took his lack of interest as a personal blow, feeling like he treated them like nothing more than ordinary, uninteresting high schoolers. The mood in the room shifted from awkward to wild as Miyu suddenly spiraled into a crisis of confidence over her own assets. She started comparing herself, wondering if she needed to be more endowed to catch some attention. Before Satsuki could even process the insanity, Miyu lunged, grabbing her and giving her a firm check. Miyu casually praised Satsuki's softness, admitting they were decent, if smaller than her own, while Satsuki could only scream, feeling like a toy in the blonde's hands. After their bizarre, energy-draining scuffle, the two girls collapsed onto the bed, breathless and disheveled. Between gasps, Miyu confessed that the uncle was a tough nut to crack because he was just too stoic. When Satsuki asked if she was really serious about pursuing him, Miyu didn't hesitate. With a steely look in her eyes, she declared that she was hooked on the challenge of unraveling the mystery behind that ice-cold exterior. Miyu drifted into thoughts of the uncle back when he was an active pro gamer. She admitted his aura was intensely terrifying, something she'd never felt from anyone else. According to her sharp instincts, a man of his caliber wouldn't stay under the radar for long, especially now that they were building a channel that was bound to blow up. She knew they had to make their move before someone else snatched him up. Staring at the ceiling with a calculating gaze, Miyu grilled Satsuki on the uncle's history. She'd heard rumors he was once the strongest dungeon rider, yet he was still single. Satsuki, buried under the barrage of questions, could only nod in defeat. It was clear Miyu was cooking up a grand scheme to exploit his bachelor status for her own gain. With a wicked, knowing smile, Miyu laid out her twisted philosophy of love. She believed that the more someone ignored her, the more she wanted to force them to their knees. To her, his indifference was a challenge to her pride. Satsuki, being the realist, thought to herself that her uncle probably wasn't the type to be swayed by cheap thrills or games. Dizzy from Miyu's aggressive logic, Satsuki just stared blankly, her mind reeling. She tried to tell herself she didn't care what her uncle thought, but the whole situation was still incredibly stressful. Just as the tension peaked, a knock at the door shattered the silence. The uncle had returned, asking from the hallway if they were done changing, and Satsuki immediately went back into high alert mode. Instead of panicking, Miyu, having completely lost her filter, shouted for him to come in, even though they were still half-dressed. Satsuki scrambled to cover Miyu's mouth, but it was too late, the uncle had already caught a glimpse. Yet, instead of a dramatic reaction or a lecherous look, Miyu was left bitterly disappointed. The man remained completely expressionless. Her honey trap had failed miserably because his ironclad mentality was simply beyond human comprehension. After the awkward tension from their failed honey trap, the uncle casually told them to stop messing around and get ready. Satsuki, mentally exhausted and rolling her eyes, stood frozen as her energy drained away from dealing with Miyu's endless antics. Miyu offered a clueless apology, promising not to drag Satsuki into such a mess again. Satsuki just let out a long sigh, watching her uncle walk away, trying to regain her composure before their real adventure began. The story shifts to the grand entrance of the Ikebukuro dungeon. Here, the makeshift team gathered, kitted out in combat gear that made them look like characters ripped straight from a fantasy RPG. Miyu, sporting a daring outfit, excitedly kicked off her live stream. With a bubbly flair, she greeted her viewers and announced that their dungeon conquest was officially underway. Satsuki stood beside her looking nervous, while her uncle maintained his signature stoic, mysterious pose behind his battle cloak. Still facing the camera, Miyu enthusiastically introduced her teammates one by one. She presented Satsuki as an energetic high schooler, though Satsuki looked as stiff as a rusty robot. The highlight was when Miyu introduced her uncle as a mysterious, powerhouse figure who was the talk of the town. Even though he tried to downplay it, claiming he wasn't all that special, Miyu hyped him up to the heavens. It didn't take long for the comments section to explode with viewers praising the beauty of both Miyu and Satsuki. Miyu was in her own world, mesmerized by the flood of donations and support pouring into her account. She beamed, thanking her fans, while leaving Satsuki feeling like an outsider in the chaos. Seeing his niece looking lost, the uncle calmed her down, telling her to just do her thing without trying to mimic Miyu's style. They eventually agreed that Miyu would handle the promotion and camera work, while Satsuki and her uncle focused on the combat waiting inside the dungeon. Two goblin minions blocking their path were instantly fried to a crisp without a chance to fight back. Satsuki was left jaw-dropped, seeing her bubbly friend actually possessed serious combat skills. Her uncle praised Miyu's efficiency in grouping and finishing the mobs. Seeing Miyu hogging the spotlight, Satsuki grew a bit envious, determined that her turn would be just as epic. The adventure continued deeper into the first floor of the Ikebukuro dungeon, where the landscape looked barren and desolate. This was the moment of truth, Takato Satsuki's first official combat appearance on camera. With her long sword drawn, Satsuki stood tall, desperately trying to mask her nerves. Behind her, her uncle and Miyu watched closely, eager to see how much of her training would hold up now that she was facing real danger. However, Satsuki's tension turned comical when the first opponent appeared, a level 1 slime, looking squishy and harmless. Even though it was just a wobbly glob of jelly, Satsuki's heart pounded as if she were facing a demon king. Miyu, sensing a golden moment, cheered her on, reminding her that the camera was rolling. Her uncle seemed impressed by how comfortable Miyu was with the dungeon atmosphere, while Satsuki struggled to muster the courage to slash the world's weakest monster. The scene opened with Satsuki trying to look cool, tossing her scabbard to the ground for dramatic effect. She entered serious mode, demanding silence from her team so she could focus. In her mind, she replayed every tutorial video she'd watched, where slimes usually don't attack if the player keeps their distance. She mapped out a strategy, either a long-range strike or a single, lethal slash to take down the creature in the blink of an eye. Without wasting a second, Satsuki lunged forward, but she was stunned by how much more agile her body felt than usual. As she leaped, she felt a strange sensation, like her body weight had vanished, allowing her to move faster than she'd ever imagined. A mix of confusion and shock washed over her face, realizing something was off about the sudden, drastic boost in her movement speed as she closed in on her target. Satsuki quickly realized this incredible speed was due to the surge of mana inside the dungeon, a phenomenon she hadn't noticed earlier because of her nerves. Now, feeling as light as a feather, she moved in the blink of an eye, appearing right before the slime. She felt stronger than her usual self, but this uncontrollable speed began to overwhelm her as she struggled to time her strike perfectly. Unfortunately, because she was moving too fast, her hand-eye coordination went haywire, and her swing missed the slime's weak point entirely. Satsuki panicked when she realized she'd missed, and the squishy monster took the chance to counterattack, jumping straight at her face. The heroic atmosphere dissolved into pure comedy as Satsuki shrieked, causing her uncle to panic as he watched his niece threatened by the weakest mob on the floor. Luckily, an automatic transparent barrier popped up from her perimeter generator, sending the slime bouncing helplessly away. Miyu was surprised Satsuki had such high-end defensive gear, though her uncle seemed to have expected it. With a pout and face flushed with embarrassment, Satsuki finally stood up and delivered one final slash, destroying the slime into tiny pieces. Instead of feeling proud, Satsuki whined and sobbed to Miyu, convinced her embarrassing moment had ruined her cool image on camera. She begged for the footage to be deleted and re-recorded, but Miyu casually reminded her that they were on a live stream watched by thousands in real time. Miyu teased her, saying modern viewers actually prefer seeing funny, relatable failures over serious combat. Her uncle just stood there, speechless at their ridiculous antics. 2 hours passed, and the atmosphere on the first floor felt far more relaxed for this amateur team. Satsuki and Miyu were now well acquainted with the combat flow, happily hunting monsters while engaging with the flood of comments on their screen. Though her uncle kept watch with his mysterious gaze, Satsuki no longer cared, focusing instead on her role as the star. The two looked adorable and in sync, ending their first floor run with laughter and a soaring reputation. Massive success found their stream, with Satsuki beaming as she saw her subscriber count smash through the 10,000 mark. With a spirited look, she couldn't believe their viewership had exploded that fast, and even Miyu felt the growth was absurd. Satsuki, once shy, started getting used to the sudden fame, feeling the gap between her dreams and reality closing. While Miyu set an ambitious goal of 1 million subscribers, her uncle looked ready to get serious and show his true power for even higher quality content. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The uncle dropped into a combat stance, radiating an intimidating, legendary charisma. With a sharp, focused gaze, he looked like a master swordsman ready to cleave through anything in a heartbeat. The air grew heavy, creating a jarring contrast between the girl's earlier cheerfulness and the lethal aura he now projected. Without a word, he stood frozen, gripping his hilt tightly as if waiting for the perfect moment to unleash a devastating finishing move. Surprisingly, the tension hit a hilarious anticlimax when it turned out there was no threat at all. The uncle relaxed, sheathing his sword while muttering that he thought he sensed something, but the area was completely empty. Since it was getting late, he called it a day, much to the disappointment of Satsuki and Miyu, who had hoped to capture some epic action on camera. They ended their live stream with a quick sign-off, leaving their dream of witnessing an explosive battle as nothing more than a pipe dream. Night fell, and we see the uncle returning to the Ikebukuro dungeon alone to secretly sweep the middle floors. Walking through the gloom under the flicker of dim streetlights, he mused that it was lucky no other anomalies had appeared, as constant trouble would be a massive headache. Yet, in the silence, he was haunted by dark memories of someone calling his name in pure terror. Flashes of a desperate warning to run, accompanied by visions of blood, flooded his mind, revealing a deep-seated trauma hidden behind his stoic expression. Striding forward, the uncle analyzed the situation. Monster strength should be consistent across floors, making the appearance of an orc king on the upper levels highly suspicious. He was relieved that the public dismissed the event as a lie, keeping his identity as the slayer of that beast under wraps. But just as he felt safe, mysterious, hooded figures emerged from the shadows. With faces decaying like the undead, these sinister stalkers signaled that a far more dangerous threat was hunting him from the dark. Sensing something was off, the uncle glanced back, deciding to investigate his gut feeling. But as he turned toward a dark corner, the hooded figures vanished into thin air, hiding perfectly behind the ancient pillars. The situation turned chilling when one of them peered out from behind a tree, eyes wide and face twisted in a nightmarish expression. These mysterious stalkers watched his every move with pure malice, proving that his casual dungeon run had devolved into a deadly hunt in the depths of the middle floors.